Welcome, gentlemen. Kind of following on from the last conversation, what is it about IoT and usage billing that goes together or doesn't go together? Does one automatically lead to the other?
I can take it first step. So I think in general, IoT, everyone looks at IoT. Sometimes we automatically connect it to billing. I think IoT is a direction that become enabled from electronics perspective, and I think there's still the business side of it needs to catch up from the billing side. Given the nature of IoT, that it's a consumption-based or usage-based model that's tied to the IoT utilization, then it definitely ties into the usage-based billing. Now, is it usage-based billing only? I don't think it is. You can definitely bill for IoT without the usage component. There's probably examples of just billing purely for subscriptions for companies that run IoT devices, and they're just charging plain subscription models for those.
Yeah, and I think it really comes down to the complexities that are seeing that connection between the mediation and going straight down into billing. So we heard the word complex used here a lot today. It becomes kind of a relative term depending on what you're talking about. But we're seeing situations of where we've got massive amounts of data being shared, where every device that gets activated on the network will contribute X amount of meg to a share plan and can consume Y back out of that. But that's all based on the state that the device is in for its subscription. So at certain states, it needs to run certain sets of rates that it's running in there. Other times it's not. It needs to prorate that across that billing period. And then that's tied back to some kind of contract commitment for a ramp up and rollout schedule where someone bought 1 million devices and is agreeing to light up 10,000 every month that's on top of it. So there's all these complexities around contract management, enforcement, as well as tying all of that usage data back into sharing and pooling as well.
So Mike, would you say that usage-based billing automatically requires mediation?
In my opinion, yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically, the way that we look at it is, whether you're talking the subscription economy, where things have gone from being a product into now being sold as a service, you're talking industrial applications. I mean, even I think it's in the book Subscribe, it talks about Caterpillar moving to the SaaS model. Out of all of these, where the mediation, we think of it as like a usage data platform, kind of like in your slide that you had earlier, right? It's that ability to be able to pull all the information that's coming off of the IoT devices and to do it at scale, to combine it, to aggregate it, collate it, clean it up, get rid of errors. I mean, that's all something that there's a lot of power that comes with that mediation platform, which ultimately creates a golden record that you can bill against.
Let's talk about, going back to the IoT notion, I love this idea. Let's talk about some more of the business cases, use cases that you're seeing with IoT. There's some of the more unusual or creative, kind of what are some of the edge cases that you're seeing that aren't just projects but are actually going to be real?
I got one for you. Asparagus as a service. This is it's from a farming perspective. It's a large company that essentially what they ended up doing is giving away all the IoT, all the sensors. Think of them like the IoT devices, but they're giving away the sensors and they're monitoring water content level in the soil, local temperature conditions and various different things like that. They're tapping into weather systems and forecasts, kind of almost doing a little bit of sort of machine learning type piece, but we're sitting there as the mediation component, if you want to think of it that way, that actually is bringing this all together and presenting it in such a way that the farmers can have a much more accurate view on their crops and how they should be taking care of the asparagus. But it's literally all sold to the farmers as a service.
Spargel as a service, I love it.
Yeah.
What, can you guys top that?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I can top that, but we're definitely seeing a lot of the connected car and the auto manufacturers starting to really take a look and have a realization that they are now software companies. And that's a tough transition for an automotive manufacturer understanding that the amount of data that they have that they're acquiring inside of the vehicles and what they can monetize that with, right? So a lot of times when we think of IoT, we think about connectivity and selling the connectivity. But what we're starting to see in the space is people starting to build that over-the-top services. Same sort of things that we saw in the communication space as well, where now maybe I'm selling the data of my windshield wiper rain sensors to the weather network to get more accurate in-place types of readings. Maybe I'm sending that data to an insurance agency for being able to do stuff, utilizing the cameras on the car as a black box. There's a lot of interesting types of ways to essentially monetize over the top on the connectivity, because connectivity, as we've always seen, is kind of a drive to the bottom. Who can be the cheapest and the most reliable, but how can I create more valuable services that layer on top of that?
I have an example. I don't know if it'll top asparagus. That's a tough one. But what we've seen that what IoT devices enable is that they enable interaction or better interaction with the customer or with the subscriber. A good example, let's say you're riding a bicycle. You rented a bicycle at the bicycle station. You're pedaling and you bought 15 minutes and maybe you punch the destination where you're going and you know you're not going to make it there. So that IoT device.
That happens in San Francisco.
There you
People
go.
start up the hill and
So, and you did not buy, there is electric battery in the bicycle, but you did not buy use of it. So in real time, this is something that can be given to a subscriber. The system can calculate, can say, hey, you're not making it to your destination in this 15 minutes. Would you like to buy some battery juice, and help you get up the hill, if you're in San Francisco. So these types of interactions before, this is just not the model that companies have. Company typically, here's your bill, or we'll charge you a late fee later on. This is a real-time subscriber kind of interaction where you can, from the business perspective, the company can use it as an upsell tool. So,
what are the biggest or what are the most unusual myths, or what are the things that people think they know about IoT and IoT-enabled business models, but where you've seen in reality it doesn't play out quite as people had thought or planned?
I think the one is that a subscription is just a subscription. I see, in this space, everybody is still trying to figure out who will actually pay for what and what is the value on things. And we've heard a lot of talk today about subscriptions, and there's that simple, okay, $5 a month and you get X, Y, Z. But in the IoT world, we have a device that might have 10 different states. And at each one of those different states, I'm going to pay a different subscription value. And based off of the tiering of the number of devices that I have in those states, I'm going to pay other different types of pricing that I want based off of that tiering. And then I'm going to roll that into a contract. And I'm going to have X amount of devices every month that are going to be in state X, Y, Z, and all that tiering on top. So when we hear, a lot of times when people are just starting to move into that subscription economy and starting to look at these things as recurring revenue, it gets very complex when you're dealing with all of these different states. And when do I actually start billing? Is it in state A, or do I get X amount of free data within that state before I start billing? Maybe it's diagnostics and test data, right? And then I can move into that state. So state management across all of those and how you're doing your subscriptions is very, very different than what we typically will see in a standard subscription.
I think that the billing models for IoT, actually, they're lacking behind the IoT technology itself. So maybe in the book that you guys mentioned in the previous session, there are some ideas, but I feel like if you look at the market, there are things that 5 years you wouldn't think about. You wouldn't think about Uber or Lyft, right? Those ideas, and now we may not even have a good idea from the business perspective of how those IoT models can be utilized. And I think having pioneers in that industry, there's very few companies that do it, and the ones that we see do it, they actually just gravitate to, we'll just do it as these are our 5 models we go after, that's how we're going to do it. So I think we've seen very little innovation from the billing side in how the IoT is being built.
Where should folks go for sources of innovation? If I'm an asparagus farmer and I haven't come across asparagus as a service yet, where should I go for ideas and kind of input? How do I avoid making some of the mistakes you guys have been talking about?
Yeah.
How should I begin to kind of conceptualize both what is possible and also what I should avoid
Sure.
before I start spending money with you guys?
You bet. Well, I mean, I'm going to kind of loop this back around, I think, to a question that you'd asked Stephen Bryant earlier about mediation. But it's interesting. So for us, being like, that's what we do. We're the mediation guys. We don't do any of the billing, none of the rating engines, none of the other pieces of it. But we've always, I would say, historically tended to be the last ones brought in, right? Gets to the end of your sales cycle, and you might say, oh my gosh, I need some help over here. Not yours, but anyway, what I'm saying is that it's flipping the other direction, where if you lead with the mediation piece, you can actually go into an existing, call it brownfield environment, and you can offer up new greenfield services. And if you were to move your billing across to one of these guys, you can literally use that as a platform to do that migration. But when it's in place, it's amazing. We go into discuss, like whiteboard discussions, and the customer will say, we've been thinking about this. Can we do that? It's actually usually almost 9 times out of 10, yes. Which becomes a salesperson's dilemma. But from a customer, you almost have like the Swiss Army capability to start offering up. You get that agile monetization platform, we call it UDP, but you get that in place, and now you have an agile infrastructure to go with it. You're automating a lot of things, and it starts opening up the ability to do things that in the past you might not have even thought of.
How do I, in a way that I'm able to kind of keep the respect of my peers, how do I say, hey guys, we're going to have a breakfast meeting on Friday, and we're going to have these great guys come in and talk about mediation? How do I do that in a way that people still talk to me on Monday? Or I get people to show up.
So I think, yeah.
I mean, I'm joking, but really, how do you like say, let's think about this, and there are these guys who can.
So I think part of that really is bringing up the last times that we came up with a great product idea and we're about to launch it, and then it got totally delayed because we forgot about the back office, right? We see that time and time again, is that someone's created a new product, everybody's really excited about it, I've got all these great models how I'm going to sell it and make this all work, and then it falls flat because they didn't even consider how they're going to actually sell it, how they're going to invoice their customer to get that money back in. And so most companies that we talk to, this is happening inside of their organization. And I'm sure in most organizations we've seen that. We've been launching and then there's a delay. Being able to bring that up, saying, do we want to do this again? Right? Is this another project where we're not going to launch on time because we haven't thought about our back office?
Yeah. I mean, kind of to answer your question in sort of the world that I live in, we find that there's something that causes you to create that meeting, to talk about mediation. You got a pain point, something that's just, you got revenue leakage, you got a huge problem that's there, and that sort of starts the discussion, but it's really, the mediation piece, if it's done correctly, it's really agnostic. So you could have with your peers that here's how I could solve your pain point, and then the people around the room see that, it can get rid of this spreadsheet. Here's 3 people that are spending all their time doing mundane tasks. We can actually automate those pieces, free up their time to do something more valuable, tapping into whatever the existing billing system, but then the person in the room that's already trying to move to some other platform, can bridge the gap, sort of like bridge across to new architectures. But I think mediation is really, for me, it's fun because it actually doesn't step on very many people's toes. It's something that everybody can get value out of.
That's right. Any questions?
Thanks again. I'll throw in another IoT question. I mean, this is an IoT panel, right? I mean, to that point about the multiple states that IoT devices take on, and sort of the new complexity that introduces. I mean, so in a microcosm, even just looking at the carrier business in IoT, right? One of the big challenge that they face is they're moving from a set of bundled plans and their data plans, traditional phones, to a world where they literally have revenue opportunities that range from 50 cents a month to could be in the hundreds a month, but really a much more broader range of business models that they have to support for their connectivity. So, you know, and then when you think about the applications then that can also be served around that, it's like, at what point do you think do we have, or what do we need to do from the billing infrastructure standpoint to be able to support far more different revenue models and so just much greater variety of it versus what we're used to today? You know, what does it take for us to get there?
Yeah, and I mean, you know, the plug to our company, right? That's really, you know, our view. Our view is configure, don't code, right? So, you know, we have a history of all sorts of different industries, grew up in the communication space, but being able to have the flexibility to play with the knobs and the switches to see what's going to work is absolutely important, right? I think everybody's trying to experiment to see what everybody's view of value is inside of this environment. So there's the value of how you're going to price it and turn and deal with all those different knobs. But in a lot of these different solutions, you have a lot of partners as well. So you've got this whole value chain of partners that need to have some kind of rev share. They're going to be part of all of this as well. And how are you going to settle that on the back end as well? So I think really, and you hear it all today, it's about flexibility, it's about agility, it's about being able to try and experiment. And if you were, like the session before, if you were the pioneer in that space and you failed, that's one thing. But if you found somebody that's found something that worked, you need to be a fast follower. You need to be able to not let them eat up that market share and be able to be there on time.
Maybe one comment is, you know, when you build the solutions that are based or they're made for, you know, IoT or for processing IoT-based consumption, you know, you're not building something that's static. So you have to account for the fact that this may change. That, you know, you may upgrade your device and tomorrow it may collect, instead of 5 states, it may have 25 states. And you want to have the system that allows you to have elasticity, that you can build for any combination of those states, and those states may impact your revenue model. So trying to look forward into what your IoT devices may provide back to you and build for that, you know, would be one of the keys.
I'll add one quick thing that I know today we're really talking about monetization. It's very billing focused, but don't lose sight of the fact that with, you know, any of our mediation platforms, there's no reason why you can't take that same golden record and send it out to the analytics platform, and you can actually create an end-to-end view, kind of do a full closed loop. So when you start talking about, you know, forward-looking, what are new types of services, buckets, pay-as-you-use, pay-as-you-grow, outcome-based models, different things like that. I mean, being able to have the analytics aspect can be really powerful.
If there's time, I have a follow-up.
Okay.
You've got 38 seconds.
Data brokers. So your take on, you know, data brokers that are coming out, try to aggregate data and sell it to the market? Any take on that?
Is it just a general comment on what we feel?
Is it going to work, or you know, what is it going to take to work? And you know, the economist has said the new oil is data, right?
I think the challenge there really is around data privacy, right, and regulatory bodies globally, right? We heard that earlier today on the analytics side of things. It's absolutely awesome to be able to have that data, to be able to drive value off of it. But what can actually be shared? What can you aggregate? What can cross physical, you know, barriers and boundaries between countries, and what's allowed and not allowed? I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we're going to have with AI and being able to do all the different things that we're seeing with, you know, with all of that data.
Gentlemen, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, Andrew. Yep, thank you.
Thanks.